another edition of Intentional Conversations. On Intentional Conversations, we seek to interview leaders in men's ministries to help men grow spiritually and help leaders and pastors to reach men in today's culture, discussing issues men face every day. It is a program where a men's ministry leader interviews leaders in men's ministry. I am your host, Mike Sandlin, and I thank you for joining us. If you have listened to many of my programs, you probably know that I strongly encourage one-on-one discipleship. If a church wants to have a life-changing movement in the community, they need to intentionally target their men, encouraging them to be in discipling relationships. This is the fastest way to help men grow in their faith. And as they grow in their faith, men will reach out in other areas of ministry to put their hands and feet to work for Christ. On the program today, we will be talking with someone in the midst of this battle to help churches target, engage, and encourage their men. My guest is someone I consider a good friend and colleague in the battle for men's souls, Kevin Gregory, an area director with Man in the Mirror. Now, Kevin is committed to serving pastors and leaders in the community surrounding the Sanford, North Carolina area. As a trained Man in the Mirror expert in men's discipleship, Kevin guides pastors and leaders through a comprehensive strategy to reach and disciple all of their men, because every man discipled impacts a marriage, family, workplace, and community. Kevin was born in Montrose, Pennsylvania, and currently resides, like I said earlier, in Sanford, North Carolina area with his family. He is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel who served in the Armored, Cavalry, Civil Affairs, and Psychological Operations. He is an ordained minister with a master's in divinity from Campbell University and has planted churches for the Southern Baptist Convention in Tennessee and North Carolina. His current focus is working with churches to assist them in getting men to engage in life-on-life discipleship. He will not rest until every man he encounters has a relationship with Jesus Christ and is doing life-on-life discipleship with other men. Kevin, thanks for being on the program today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with me.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
That's good, man. Of course, Kevin and I have known each other for several years. I used to work with Man in the Mirror as a field representative for a while, and that's kind of the way we got to know each other. And of course, he and I had a common mentor for a number of years, but he's since gone on with the Lord, and Jeff Kasaya, and that's how Kevin and I got to know each other. And it's been a great working relationship between the two of us, and I thank him so much for his effort and what he does for the Lord in ministry to men. Well, Kevin, I start all my podcasts with my guests asking them two questions. And one of that first questions is, what is your favorite verse? What verse do you really, or maybe just a verse that's really speaking into your life right now? And why is that verse so meaningful?
I have a ton of them, Mike, especially as
I only pick one or two only, please.
I know. I'm just saying, and I saw your email and thought, well, yeah, I better narrow that down. But I mean, of course, as iron sharpens iron, so shall one man sharpen the accounts of another. I mean, that's probably one of my major life verses. One that's speaking to me right now is 2 Timothy 2:2. The things you've seen me do amongst many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will do likewise. I mean, he's basically telling Timothy, find fat people, faithful, available, teachable, and specifically men, and pass on the mantle of the gospel message so that they can in turn, do life on life with somebody else. And so that's kind of my thing. I also know you said, is there a life verse or something that drives you? Well, yeah, there is for me. It's been modified over the years, but I mean, I always stick to this one: abide in God daily, reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, serve humbly, invest eternally, and teach and train other men to do likewise every day of my life. That's kind of has been my life statement for probably since 97, 98, when I started to iron it out. That's been my life verse, and that's kind of what I want to do. I want to see other guys become fully devoted followers of Christ and disciple making putting into the lives of other men.
Yeah, I kind of recognized some of what you were saying there about leading courageously, reject passivity, and so forth. That's a little bit of Robert Lewis's quest for authentic manhood. It comes out of that, and that's some good stuff there. Well, share with our listening audience about how you came to Christ. When did that occur, and what was that experience like, and how's life been since?
Yeah, well, I've been accused of having a drug problem. I was drugged to church from the time
I was there. I know that drug problem.
real small child. So to me, I've been in the church most of my life, but the most two significant events, actually three. I'll caveat the three of them. Three significant events in my growing up years. Early on, I didn't know anything about it. I was baptized in the United Methodist faith. I had nothing. I mean, it didn't really resonate with me. In 1969, we joined a church, the Free Methodist Church in upstate New York, in the Brighton. It was Edgewood. And once we got to that community of believers, we found a fellowship, a body that believed in discipleship. And so through a Sunday school teacher, and she's still a ministry partner, but actually today, Mike, my Sunday school teacher, the one woman who led me to faith in Christ, is still a financial partner today, Jean Bartlett. She actually was the first person to introduce me to Jesus. And so at the age of 6, I think I was at that time, I believed and trusted in the Lord at that time. And I, of course, didn't know anything what that meant, didn't know, where that would lead to. Fast forward to 1973, and there was a push in our church to get young people to become members of the Free Methodist faith. And so a part of that discussion with an associate pastor was, where are you with the Lord? What is your relationship with the Lord look like today? And why should we be, letting you become a member of the church at your young age? And I was, that question just struck me, and I really had to come to terms with the grips of, well, I'm here because my parents know. I'm here because I really do believe in Jesus. He is in my heart, and he really is guiding me, and I really wanted to be a member of the church. And so through that process, my faith was solidified right then. Fast forward another couple of years, through the influence of several people, I joined the military and found myself at Fort Riley, Kansas, at a military chapel under the tutelage of one of my favorite chaplains, Curry Vaughn. He actually wrote a book, Battleground, out of Vietnam. And under his tutelage and leadership, I was convicted growing up in the United Methodist faith. Of course, you're baptized as an infant. Growing up in the Free Methodist faith, baptism wasn't very talked about. But under his tutelage, I realized, I hadn't really taken that step. It's not that I didn't believe it. I already did. I already was working all that kind of stuff, those kinds of details. But I had never really made a public profession through baptism. And so under his guidance and direction in December of 1982, I took that step and became baptized. And so from that moment on, I have been a strict follower to the Lord, but it wasn't, joined the military, married a missionary wife, the missionary kid, had, great kids and all that kind of stuff. But it became apparent to me that something was missing. In 95, I encountered a group of guys that had formed a Promise Keepers group, a small group. And it was from that group study that I realized, this is not a Lone Ranger thing that you do. You become the faith, you get baptized, whatever. I realized, I've been, Christian for a while, and yet I had not really matured much in my faith. My faith was still strong, but it wasn't where it could be and where it needed to be. And I hadn't done any life-on-life transition with anybody else. I may have, shared my faith, but it was few and far between. It was not a priority to me. And in 95, I realized things had to change. And this group of guys challenged me in different ways to grow in my faith. And it was from that encounter with those guys that I think things really started changing. I really started to mature a lot more in Christ.
Yeah, it is a growth, because the Bible talks about spiritual milk and spiritual meat and things of that nature of growing in Christ, and it's interesting. Well, you've been with Man in the Mirror for a number of years. How long have you been with them?
Actually, I'm this officially, since they offered me a position as area director. It's been coming up on 7 years in March. It'll be.
Okay.
I
Okay.
I signed up with them in 2015. Yeah, 2015. So it'll be 7 years in this March will be my 7th anniversary.
Well, and what do you do as an area director? What is your role?
I really serve pastors. I mean, that's the heart of what I do is build relationships to serve pastors to be able to help train leaders within their church to reach and disciple men. I mean, that's really what I do, and I really enjoy the opportunity to get to know pastors first, and then ask them to identify a key guy in their church that I can take under my wing and show how to reach and disciple other men. And they usually hand off a guy to me, and I spend the season with them, working with them, and helping them to disciple other guys. I mean, to create an environment where guys are growing in their faith and walking even deeper in the Lord.
That's good, and it's great to know that pastors is willing to accept you and encourage some of their men to come under your tutelage, so to speak, to ministry. Because one of the things I think we both understand is that most church leaders don't fully understand what it takes to really target their men and engage their men. Would you say that's true?
Yes, and I would say also too. I mean, I serve a number of pastors, and this is the hard part and the hurt, because I hear it in their voice. I mean, I met with a pastor, just a month or two back, and asked him to identify a key leader in his organization that he thought might have a heart and a passion for guys that I could develop and train. Mm-hmm. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "I don't have that person." He said, "I don't. That doesn't exist in my church," and that too often I feel like that is the case. And so there's a lot of pastors out there that just don't have those right-hand guys, those guys that are coming along. A lot of the pastors are out there thinking, well, I'm here, I teach every Sunday. A lot of these pastors, like that one particular, is bivocational, and so they have a full-time job that they're working elsewhere, and they're just, on the weekends, taking care of a body of members, whatever that looks like. But a lot of them, as in this particular case, are not mature enough in their faith where he felt like he can hand them off to me to grow them. And so we talked about, okay, so what is it going to take to bring those guys forward? And so I'm helping him to develop some opportunities for him to get to know those guys a little bit better, find out where they are spiritually and what it takes to get them to do the next step to grow in their faith.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because that's one of the things that I struggle with too. And people I talk with is, why is it we don't have men in our churches that feel the passion and the calling? Because you and I both believe it is a calling to minister to men as a leader. But why is it, do you think, that churches don't have those men they can tap into like that, and pastors struggle to find guys like that in their church? Is it because of their upbringing? Is it because our method of training men's leaders is not well known and understood, or what do you think?
I think, Mike, you hit a couple of issues. I mean, I think there's the culture that we've created in our churches is that the pastor is the guy. And so whatever he says goes, and whatever he does, we try to follow. And the reality is, if that pastor's never been discipled and he knows how to do, the theology, he's been taught all the preaching methodology, and he does all that. But if he's never truly been discipled, then he's not going to know how to disciple the men of his church, because it's not happened to him. He's learned it a particular way. He got his information from the pulpit or from, class instruction or whatever. And so that's his mindset right away as well. Yeah, if I give enough pulpit time and I give enough instruction, in class time, then, they'll get it, and eventually we'll get down the road to where we're at. But if they've never done life on life to talk the issues of life biblical, how to deal with them biblically, then I don't think, they're not knowing how to work with men over a period, over a season, instead of in these short bites of training. Well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I think that's one of the big issues, that if they've never had that experience of what does life discipleship look like over a longer period of time, then they don't know how to do it. And so to anticipate that a pastor is immediately going to come and say, hey, I've got this and I'm ready to do it, I think is wrong on our part to think that. And then the second part is, I think the church has gotten away from leadership development in the way that we've, back in the day when, long before, I would say in the 1800s, 1900 time frame, it was nothing to have a lot of male teachers grow up in the church. I mean, the males, it was a male dominated environment for the most part. And the pastor relied on a lot of elders and a lot of deacons and other things to carry the ministry. Fast forward to that, you got guys going off to war over a period of time, and the next thing you know, you got women having to step into those roles. And when the guys come back, instead of stepping back into the church, they advocated and they stayed away from the church. And this is physical things that are happening. And there's a guy that wrote about this. A guy by the name of Poltz wrote a book about the feminization of the Christian church. And it's not, it wasn't intentional, not on anybody's part to be negative. It's just that's the way that the church shaped. And so, now we're into the 1950s and 60s, and women are the dominant force in the church. And the men have advocated because they didn't want to usurp anything. They didn't want to mess up anything. And so now we've got a whole different picture of what manhood looks like, because now the women are leading and the men have kind of taken a step back. And when, boys growing up under that go, oh, well, then mom's the one to go through if I need to know anything about the Bible. And so the man has stepped back out of the role of the priest and king. And now, if we try to bring that back in, there's a little bit of resistance there. And then the family is kind of shook up about it. And so we need to transition at some point to get back to that. But the reality is that is a serious issue that's caused a little bit of the problem as well. And the other thing is we don't have a seminary that's teaching on this, Mike. I mean, let's just face it.
I was going to mention that.
When we formed the National Coalition for Ministry to Men back in 97 period, the number one issue was how many books are out there dealing with the issues that men face. And what are the biblical answers to those issues? Because, again, we're talking about men have stepped away from the church. They're not talking about those things at church. The church is a little bit different makeup than it has been before. More or less women and children friendly, and a lot less man friendly. And so the initial thought was, well, we need to get curriculum back in, to talk about these issues for men. We need to open the church back up so that men feel more comfortable going back and then talking about those ideas. And so that's now, moved us a little bit further down the road. We're still trying to work through that. And so we're now starting to see a trend come back to that. But the reality is we have a whole couple of generations, 2 or 3 generations that haven't grown up in what it looks like for the discipleship piece to be handed down from generation to generation. What does that look like?
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you're saying. I know Steve Sonderman and I were talking here not too long ago about training and the fact that so many of our church people in our church all the time thinks the pastor has all the answers because they went and they got their theological degree, they got their master's degree in seminary, and they've been trained in all aspects of ministry. And it's not to take anything away from the pastors. They've been thoroughly trained in doctrinal and theological processes and how to communicate and be apostolatory on their preaching and so forth. And a lot of them do an excellent job. But just because they went to seminary does not mean they know how to operate or run a particular ministry to a specific group of people. And that's one of the things that he and I was talking about pretty heavy. You go look at the curriculum of just about any Christian college or any seminary, you will not find anything about how to minister to men or in any shape, form, or fashion. And so it's important for people like yourself to be able to step up and be able to make yourself available on the things you've been trained in, and be able to help them understand. How hard is that? Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think there's a couple of issues in regards to seminary. One of the things that I came away from seminary in learning that Christian education in the 1800s was a huge deal. I mean, in fact, 17 and 1800s, you learned English out of a Bible. I mean, seriously. I mean, you're right. in the primer. Then the original primers back in the early days were all about biblical principles, and that's where you learned and grew up in that type of an environment. Well, that's of course completely changed now. We have a different way of education, but the bottom line is we still need solid doctrinal and theological education. Christian education in the church still is very essential. The Sunday school program that we all started late 1800s, early 1900s was an attempt because we knew that the schools were going more and more secular in their education. They were getting rid of the theological based primer and some other things, and so the way to counteract that was, of course, start the Sunday school. That to put that Christian education back into the church that was so essential. But we're only talking 1 hour a week versus the school, which was getting the kids 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, or 6 to 8 hours a day, depending on where you went to school. But the bottom line is the 1 hour was not making up for what needed to take place. And so, again, we're talking a generational issue that's been passed over 2 or 3 generations now. So where we're at a point where biblical illiteracy is probably at an all-time high, even though we're doing it from the pulpit.
Yep.
The Christian education in our Sunday school is you follow a book format usually now, and it's printed out for you. It has a passage of scripture and a little bit of a narrative, but they don't want to make it too difficult, or they don't want to make it too hard because people are reading at a 6th grade level and all those other issues that they throw into it, where previous to this, we had higher education levels than we have now. And of course, the emphasis is not where it needs to be. But I think the problem is we need to get back to that. And how do we get back to that? It goes back to the things that we're mandating within Man the Mirror is we've got to get the man right, because he's now the man problem. He's been advocating, he's been pulling away from the right role function within the church and the family and the community. So we have to get him back into the picture like he should. So he needs to have a learning curve of what that should have looked like and what it should look like biblically to put him back in there. And that's going to take a little bit of time, and then it's going to take generations of men doing that over a period of time to start to reverse this trend. And I think we're ultimately going to get there. It's just a matter of we now need to make that course correction.
Oh, yeah, I agree. When, one of the things that Pat Morley used to always say, and he wrote it in his book, No Man Left Behind, that it's this process of doing what you're saying, of getting men to understand the importance of one-on-one relationships and discipleship in men's ministry and building that effective and vibrant ministry to men. It don't happen overnight. It just doesn't happen overnight. It takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years to establish it where it's a perpetual thing, so to speak. And that's one of the things that you and I have both learned. It's just something you got to stay with it, and it's me that's speaking to one person. And
that's why
others.
But I think that's why our model is so important, and then the engine behind the model. I mean, we've got this model we call the No Man Left Behind. I mean, it's nothing more than a biblical model of what getting men to be in life on life discipleship looks like. We want the end product to be fully devoted followers of Christ, and out of that abundance, they're bringing others along with them. But in order to do that, we've got to get back into a cyclic, established pattern of what we call create, capture, and sustain. We got to create the opportunities for guys to get into community, to get into this training pipeline, capture them while they're there, to get them to, do a season of training, whatever that looks like, 4 to 6 weeks. We try to keep it small, but enough to get them, a little bit educated and a little bit more knowledge biblically and what it takes to grow as a man. And then we try to sustain that over a longer period of time, get guys plugged in more and more to the, deeper growth opportunities, more opportunity to connect with other guys, those kinds of things. But we have to keep that going, and we have to be intentional about this process. In churches, we really need to get pastors to capture this vision of what's happened to this over a period of time and what's going to take to reverse this. And so the question we ask pastors is, where do you want to see the men of your church a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What do you want? What do you see them doing, and what do you want them to be doing in those years to come?
Let's talk about that model a little bit, because most people, if they haven't read the book No Man Left Behind, they haven't been to any of the Man and Marrow training classes of No Man Left Behind, they probably don't fully understand what we're talking about when we talk about the model. There's a foundation that you have to build as you begin to develop this process of a conveyor belt, basically, is what is used. So let's talk about that foundation. What's that foundation that churches need to look for first? What do they need to strive to do to establish that foundation for that conveyor belt?
Well, the first foundation has to be the biblical foundation, because everything we need to do is we need to go back to, what is the church's mission? What is its mandate? And the only mandate that was given was in Matthew 28, 18 through 20, which says, the Lord says, go ye therefore in all the world and make disciples. He didn't say anything but that's what we're supposed to do. So if the priority, the first foundation is not discipleship, then the church is missing the mark on what it's supposed to be doing, what its mission is. And so we're trying to help churches to recognize your number one priority is discipleship. Right. That's your number one priority. And so if that's not the base, that first base that you're talking about, those three strands, if that's not the first base, you're not going to get very far.
Amen.
I mean, that's the bottom line. And then the second base that we've got to get over, and this is that cultural base that we talked about, where men are no longer, feel welcome in the church. They've advocated that role. The environment's changed. It's, a lot of churches out there are women and children friendly, but they're not man friendly. And so the next, base that have to be in there is we have to create environments that men can feel safe in, that can come back into the church and say, you are welcome here. You're not only welcome here, but you're an essential part of why we exist. This church exists to reach men. This church exists to bring guys in.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, I talk about a lot is masculinity. The church got to feel a little bit more, show a little bit of masculinity. That's not necessarily just like do away with all your feminine porn, but you got to bring some of that masculinity back into it and helping men to feel. Because one of the questions that we often ask pastors and men's leaders is, when men leave your church, how would they answer this question? Men are blank here, are they valued? Are they welcome, or are they considered a nuisance or something that we want them to really think through that process of how are they targeting men? What's the next one? What's the next one?
And the third one is the most important one in my estimation, only because I feel like, as a church, we want the pastor to be the head of the church. So we want him to fulfill the role to say he's going to cast the vision to bring the others along. But we also know that the pastor is we're not asking the pastor to add a program. We're not asking the pastor to, put on, something specific for men. We're asking the pastor, what is the vision? Where does he want to see his guys grow to over a period of time? So all we want the pastor to do is identify that vision, where he wants to see the guys come, and then to identify the guys that he has in his own congregation, the leaders, the next set of leaders that he feels like he can empower to carry that mission and vision forward. That's what we're asking. And so the three strands of leadership is, okay, we got the pastor. We're asking him to identify that lead guy, because we want, amongst that group of team or whatever, we need to have a lead guy that's got a passion and a heart to see men grow in Christ and grow in their faith. So we want that lead guy, and then we want that team. That lead guy can't do this by himself either, even with a pastor. It's going to take a team of guys to bring this about in the church. And so we want them to build those three strands, the pastor, that key leader, and the team. to take that ministry forward. And so that's the third base of that foundation. Before you get to the create, capture, sustain, which is the engine to drive that conveyor belt, like you're talking about, to bring the church to the mission of making disciples.
Amen, amen. And you do need those individuals, because one of the things we have seen over the years, so many churches will just find a man to put on their nominating form or whatever form they may have, whatever it may be, to fill a slot, so to speak. They'll just come up to a guy and say, hey, man, we got to put somebody in here as our men's leader, whatever they may call it, director, whatever. Would you do that? And he feels obligated to help the church out, to be a team member, so to speak. So he says, yeah, I'll do it, but he ain't got a clue what to do, and nobody knows what to teach him. So they put him there, and he may try to do something. And he may get some things going, but something will happen that his job will cause him to move somewhere else, or he'll get burned out even because he's trying to do it all by himself, or he'll take another responsibility in the church, and there's nobody there to step up into that role that he's at. But through this 3 strands of leadership you're talking about, that team leadership role, you'll have somebody that's prepared to move into that spot, so it keeps it going. So I think that's one of the things that we have failed over the years to help our leaders to understand the importance of really connecting there in leadership with our men. That's super. Now, what about once you get that foundation started, where do you go from there?
It goes back to that create, capture, sustain cycle. It's around the pastor vision. What do we want to see in that vision, men doing 2, 3 years, 5 years down the road? What do we want to see men be able to do? And then trying to figure out, okay, now we have a ministry to men. Every church has a ministry to men. Every last one that says, well, we don't have anything going on, whatever, you all have a ministry to men. It's just, what does it look like in your context? And that's what we need to check.
I used to tell people all the time, I still do. I still tell people, they say, we don't have a ministry to men. I say, oh, yes, you do. It depends on what you're either telling the men that they're important, or you're telling the men they're not important, but you have a ministry to men. Whether you think you do or not. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
anyway, so anybody that's connected to the church, and this is where we get, pastors to start making an assessment. This is where we come in and we kind of do a pre-survey and say, okay, so how many men do you have in attendance? And then we start asking questions like, so how many men come to your church every day? So you got the mailman, and you got the FedEx driver, and you got the janitor, and you got the groundskeeper, and you got, okay, so whether you like it or not, every one of those guys is being ministered in some way when they walk in your door, good or bad or indifferent. I mean, they're going to feel welcome or not feel welcome, but either way, the bottom line is you have a larger ministry to men than you probably realize. So we try to get them to identify what that looks like, and then we try to get them to identify the types of men that are coming to the church. You got the natural guys, don't know Christ, but they may have a curiosity about what's going on, so they're coming. You got the cultural Christians. Hey, they grew up in a church. Everything's fine. You got to give your money in tithe. They come to church because that's the cultural thing to do. I mean, my parents went, so I'm going. And then
pure habit. Yes.
Then you got the biblical guys. Those guys that made a statement of belief, have been followed that up with baptism. They're coming to the church. You got them there. They may not be actively involved in whatever, but they're there. And then you have those that are in leadership, those that, believe, trust, and they may be making disciples. They may not. We don't know until we engage them to find out where they exactly stand in their leadership skills and whatever they're doing, but they're there. And then we have a fifth type, which is in every one of those categories, and that's the hurting guy.
Right.
Because you got a hurting guy in every one of those categories, and what's the church offering those guys? And the problem is, in our society right now, there's so much hurt and pain that the church is not even prepared to deal with the hurting guys. And so oftentimes we don't even consider those because we don't have the ministries and we don't have the things available or the resource even to help some of those guys that are dealing with some of those major issues, pornography, addictive behavior, you name it, suicide, whatever. I mean, we just, as a church, which is sad because we were that source in the 1800s when there was a major spiritual issue or when there was a major even psychological issue. The church pastor, the church was the place that most of those people went to get that resource. And now it's flipped. We secularized everything. We send everybody outside the church to get that mental health and that alcohol addiction and whatever. But the reality is the church is the answer. We have the biblical basis to resolve everything that's on the face of the earth. God's given us the opportunity, and the hurting man should be finding that resource in the church. And the reality is we're not prepared as churches to even receive them.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't help. Yeah, I couldn't help but think when you were talking about the various things that churches used to be about, is Keith Green, probably dating myself a little bit, but Keith Green, which was a Christian artist back in the early 70s, he used to say a lot of times the church was the original homeless shelter. The church was the original pregnancy counseling center. The church was the original food stamp area. The church was the original unemployment office, so to speak. And we stopped doing that, and we relegated it to the culture to do that, and that's caused a lot of issues. And when you're dealing with men have a hard time sharing their feelings and their hurts, but you've got to establish something some way, and that's how you do that through your discipleship, is developing those groups and those trainings within that one-on-one discipleship to meet those needs of the men. You've heard me quote, and the scripture. You're a pastor. You know the scripture of two is better than one, is greater return of their labor, because if one falls down, there's another there to lift him up. But pity the man that doesn't have another to lift him up. That's what we need in our lives. So,
but I think, Mike, the perception is that when we're offering safe places, it is that that's for the hurting man. It's not for me. I mean, that's the mentality of most guys. And the problem is because the church is so geared, let's just say, and so educated now to the process of solving the theological and doctrinal issues. So it's the head game. So and the touchy feeling, because we're used to the touchy feeling now over our culture. And so most guys, if I were a guy, I'd feel uncomfortable with those two things if that was not my comfort zone. And the reality is the church was the place way back when where men played hard, together. They did life together. They did major things. A church building was everybody got together and they built the church. And that was the foundation. They physically built the church, but they also just had a lot of fun. They did barbecues and picnics and, you name it. The guys had challenging times and fun things at church. Church culture was a time where a man could be a man around other men. And we've gotten away from that. And so now when we start talking about the head things, I need to learn things, whatever. So that's kind of a head thing. That's a little bit of a turnoff. If we talk, we're going to have small groups where we're going to talk about all of our life's problems and our issues. And so that sometimes is a turnoff for guys. But if they knew that this is the place where we're going to go hunting, fishing, and shooting, or we're going to go out and do one of the extreme sports or whatever, they would see church in a different light if that was the case. And the reality is, the church needs to be all that. We need to be the place where we can play hard, have fun, and at the end of the day, help men to deal with the issues biblically that they're going to face in their lifetime. And that's the reality of what church is supposed to be about. That's the life on life. So we're not telling guys to come in the small band, these mamby-pamby small groups, share my personal intimate feelings with a whole mess of guys, and I'm going to feel okay at the end of the day. No, you probably won't. The reality is, we want you to turn to God, to abide in him, and out of what he's taking you through, share that with other guys to help them to learn that the life of a male, biblical male, is what Christ was like. He had the face of a warrior. He went to the cross, warrior-like, doing that. He was a warrior in a temple when he turned tables and chased everybody out. That's the warrior face. That's what guys are meant to do. They're the protectors. They're the warriors. They're the ones that go fight the wars. That's exactly what happened in church and got us into this place in the first place. But the reality is we need to be warriors back and usurp. Instead of advocating, we need to get back in to our roles in the church to be the men God's called us to be in that environment. Play the warrior, play the lover, play the friend, and play the priest or king, which is another piece we haven't even talked about, Mike. And that is, we need to be the spiritual servant leaders of our houses, our families, our communities, and our churches. And we've advocated that role in a big way. And we need to get back into being the spiritual leaders in those environments.
Amen. Amen. You know, Kevin, you and I can sit around the table, so to speak, and talk about this all day long. We both have such a passion for this and such a desire to see men become the men God's created them to be and help them to get back into their roots where they're supposed to be. But we don't have that time today. We're coming up on our time. We got to start wrapping things up here a little bit. So we'll get you back on at some point in the future, and maybe we can pick up from where we've left off right here and go on and talk more about that create, capture, and sustain activity. About what do we mean by creating, what do we mean by capturing, what do we mean by sustaining, and see if we can simulate that a little bit and help people understand a little bit more about what that's all about. I would love to have you back on at some point in the future to do that particular program, and because it's very important for our churches and our leaders to understand the process of that. But in the meantime, I want to give you a couple of minutes here first to just share, as we start to come and bring our program to a close, to share what's really on your heart, what's God laid on your heart right now about ministering to men, and what do you and I and other leaders in our churches need to do so we can start changing this cultural war that we're in for the battle for men's souls.
I think this hit me over the weekend, Mike. I was asked to share on Saturday doing a global television, internet television thing, and the question was, is the church ready for a revival? And so it struck me because I really wanted to answer that question. I want to be able to have a discussion about this. And I think the issue here is, do we see the number one issue, I think, is, do we see a need right now for that? Is this, do we not, have we not identified the man problem enough to realize that there's something wrong and we need to change it? And then the second piece is, do we believe that with God it's possible to do this? Because I think a lot of churches out there have given up and said, you know what, we need to maintain the status quo. We need to, just be what we need to be. We don't need to push or rock the boat. And the reality is, do we believe that we serve a God that this can be possible for a revival to happen? And do we trust him as the source to make it a reality? And then the next means is, are we praying for it? Are we praying for that to do? And then those of us that are channels that have surrendered lives, are we channeling what it looks like to live this masculine life out in the church? Are we individually building relationships with other guys with the opportunity to make them become disciple makers? Or are we allowing the obstacles to get in the way? That's the issue.
Well, Kevin, if people want to get up with you, I know they can go to the website of maninthemirror.org, and they can look for area directors there on the top of the screen to pick you out. But you also have an email address that they can reach out to. What's that email address?
It's Kevin Gregory at maninthemirror.org.
Kevin Gregory at maninthemirror.org. And folks, I'd encourage you to do that. Kevin is a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience. And like I said, he is pastorally trained. And so he understands a little bit about what's going on in the pastor's mind, so to speak, and the things he has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So just reach out to him, pastors, and I think you'll be very pleased with some of the information he would provide you. Kevin, I appreciate you being on the program today. It's, like I said, we could continue on, and we're going to get you back on, and we didn't cover half of what we could cover, and we'll get you back on, and we'll finish up that discussion about create, capture, and sustain.
But we had to trust the Lord got us to what we needed to cover today, Mike.
Amen. I appreciate it. There's no doubt in my mind we covered what we needed to cover today, and we will deal with the rest of it later. Well, as we close the program, I would encourage you, if you would, to check out my book, The Call, A Journey into Men's Ministry. It's on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. You can reach out to there and get there to get it. And I'd appreciate it if you would leave us a review of the book. It would be greatly appreciated after you read it. And I thank you for listening to Intentional Conversations with Mike Sandlin. Intentional Conversations is a production of Cape Fear Men, a men's ministry coalition. If you enjoyed the program, I'd like to ask you to do two things. Number one is to share the program with a friend. And two, consider helping us keep these broadcasts coming to you by giving to Cape Fear Men. You can give by going to capefearmen.net and clicking on the Give to Cape Fear Men button at the top of the page. It will be appreciated. Cape Fear Men is a 501c3 organization operating under Ministry Alliance, and all donations are tax deductible. And I thank you in advance for any donations. If you want to learn more about Cape Fear Men, go to capefearmen.net. We can help you reach your men in your church. And if you want to know more about what we discuss on these programs, go there too, and you can find out the information on the podcast. If you'd like to speak to me directly, email me at mike.sandlin@capefearmen.net. Now I'm going to leave you with a blessing that Kevin and I mentor used to say to us all the time after he finished meeting with us and praying over us. He would say, I pray God will keep you a rock to stand on, a brook to drink from, and a tree to shade you. So this is Mike Sandlin saying God bless, and I hope you will join me again on the next Intentional Conversations with Mike Sandlin.